Naseem Talukdar is a social entrepreneur, philanthropist, and investor who has a wealth of experiences in social issues of homelessness, sustainability, and waste management. He's a founder of Feed the Homeless in Bristol, and he's also founded the charity Projects Against Plastic. He's a wealth of experience, and it's a pleasure to have you on, Naseem. Thank you for coming.
Assalamu alaikum, and it's an absolute pleasure to be here, Hamza. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, so let's get cracking then. To begin with, just quickly, you have this vast career in activism and doing different projects around Bristol. Could you tell us about how you got started? About your interests, what people might think, okay, I want to be a doctor or engineer, whatever, and you're doing projects against plastic and you're helping the homeless. So what got you into that? Could you tell a bit about your background, please?
Yeah, sure. Like every other Asian family, I was raised to be, successful in terms of becoming an engineer, becoming a doctor, and becoming a certain profession where we measure the success within young people, within our children, within the past generation. So I was working as an engineer. I had a really good life. I was earning quite a bit. I was traveling around the world. I was doing a dream job in my early 20s, late 20s. When I hit my 30s, I was visiting Bristol uh, in Broadmead, just out of shopping, having a bit of shopping. And then I saw someone walked past by McDonald's and put something in the bin. So, somebody ate some food, probably got some leftover, put it in the bin. And there was another guy across the road who went targeted to that bin to kind of capture that package. And that felt really odd. Now, this is the first time I actually seen homeless people, trying to get some food from a bin in Bristol city centre, and that was 2015. And I was like, I just shocked for a second. I thought this is something that quite familiar in an Indian movie or back home in Bangladesh or other places that we've been painted a picture. Not in, one of the wealthiest country in the world, one of the wealthiest city in Bristol, where I just witnessed somebody's, trying to have some food. That really struck me quite a lot. Coming from, obviously, I'm a British Bangladeshi, coming from that back in the background where we have number of restaurants. My father used to own a restaurant. I have friends that owns a restaurant. I seen a lot of food cooked. I've seen a lot of food wasted. I seen, feeding a lot of people. And I thought, this is just, a really shocking surprise to see someone struggling for a basic right to eat. So in my head, I started to kind of think, how can I feed these people? And I just could not approach to someone to offer food, which I felt a really, really hard thing to do. I mean, I design, I design equipments to deal with, Airbus military. I designed test stuff with the Navy, but yet I could not approach to someone to offer him some food. I just did not have that confidence in me. I just didn't know what to do. And I felt really, really frustrated. So I went back to my drawing board and I thought, I looked at, where I am with life, where I want to be, and I felt like, I really need to put my resources, my skill set and everything else I have into a better use rather than just make money. And that's where was my turning point. And I guess, I was, my Allah sent me into the right spot at the right time to able to have that eye opened and put resources. So that was where Feed the Homeless started to shape up, started to have a dream of feeding people, and how do we actually do that, and how do we do it in a sustainable way, and what kind of challenges do we have. So all this kind of technical logistical questions arrived, and with the skills we had, with the number of volunteers that I got involved with, we have managed to deliver food, for the last 5 years in Bristol city centre, providing at least basic essential. And these are home cooked food, warm food, that not just only carries the substance, but carries a really warm message as well. And I think that was very important for us.
And when you got started with Feed the Homeless, were you doing this full time, or was this on a volunteer basis?
So everything I do in terms of charity is all a volunteer basis. And the reason that I kept it on that level is when you do something on a volunteer basis, when you do it based on a passion, which does not have a financial driver behind it, you can be very bold, you can be very upfront, you can be very honest. The only time you can't be all that is when you have financial, people to make happy, boxes to tick, something to deliver. And I always avoided that as much as I could to make sure that I'm doing this, for the right reason. And I thought for me that was very important. So while I was working full time for, University of Bristol and other projects, I had to make time, I had to sacrifice time, steal time from my family and other commitments to make sure that I was done. But how we are placed and how we are, in life, I think if you really want to make it happen, if you really want to make some time for other people, you can. It's just we are really lazy. We are so lazy. I mean, last 10 years have taught me a lot, where I wasted, hours of my time doing nothing, playing games or, doing other things. I could use that time to actually do something, make a difference to other people's life. And that is so much better, and so much, satisfactory than anything else. So making that time, was a challenge, but I managed to do it, which is quite, quite a bit of achievement for myself and for my family.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Were there any other groups doing feeding the homeless in Bristol at that time, or were you the first one to get started?
So yes, there's always other groups that are doing it. So if you look at the history of feeding people or feeding homeless people, it's always been driven by the church, by religious groups or religious activity, because obviously all religion takes quite a bit of a pride of feeding, the needy, the homeless people. So it's always led by an individual organization there, part of the faith group. So where we come in with a slightly difference is we were one of the first charities in Bristol to have multi-faith group working together. So we were the most diverse charity in England, if not in Europe at that time. I mean, we won the National Diversity Award in 2018, and we were finalists in the European Diversity Award in 2019. And because this was one of the few charities, I want to say only one of the few charities where the Muslims, the Christians, the Jewish, and non-religious people are working together, shoulder to shoulder, to support the homeless people, and this was only possible done, under the banner of Feed the Homeless. So that's where I think we made a bit of an impact within various communities. So it wasn't just about led by a faith-based organization. It was led by something that incorporated all the faith and non-faith people to come together and support each other. I think that was quite important. The second part was what we provided was actually home cooked food. Generally there are a lot of food banks. There's a lot of services that can provide food, but very few places actually had home cooked food, which is a hot meal basically, which we provided, which was something really amazing, and we were one of the first one to actually do it consistently over many years.
How did you get home cooked food? Because that's probably quite difficult to actually source.
So originally, when I started, the idea was that we got 365 days. I probably know 200 restaurants in Bristol. I can probably know another, few more. So if we can arrange 365 restaurants to cook one day a year to provide, for example, we have about 200 rough sleepers maximum at that time. I would say 120, 130, but let's say 200. For a restaurant to cook 200 meals for a day once a year, it's a lot easier to do it. They can actually cook something quite nice because that's one day of the year. When the reality hit, the logistics of kind of running that, the logistics of delivering and managing all the red tape around food services, was really, really ridiculously intuitive. So organically, we started to see a number of families. So we had a registered 50 families. They would take in turn and cook with their families, with their young children, and they will make a project on the weekend where they will cook 20, 30 meals. So we had families out there around the Bristol would cook about 100, 150 meals, and then they will drop off a point on the weekend. For example, we used to do Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So drop off a point on that evening. And then the other volunteers, like students, they would come and pick those up and deliver those, on those hotspot of homelessness. So somehow that really worked well because we're not just delivering food, we are also educating, raising an awareness with a lot of the families. We are giving opportunity to people do something that are quite, effective, impactful. A lot of the families, when I spoke later on, said they actually really enjoyed that. Their children really enjoyed that. Some of them would draw messages on their boxes, and they would be looking forward to actually doing a cooking session with their family, creating more bonding with their family. So it actually had a lot of positive impact, which wasn't planned, of course. But the more we kind of move forward, we realized there's a lot more than just feeding people. It was people connecting from all sorts of communities. And imagine a charity with so many people from so many backgrounds cooking so many different kind of food. We had a menu, of amazing food that our, our homeless people really enjoyed it because this is something they can't get. I mean, if you go to a church-based or any really faith-based food bank or any stations, the maximum you're going to get is soup and a bread. I mean, I've been through that because I obviously wanted to see what is out there. And there's no point replicating the same thing that everybody else is doing, or a sandwich, and that was it. I mean, that was if you're in a lucky streak. So having that kind of menu, that kind of food, that kind of people cooking it was brilliant. And I'll tell you a small story how this really saved lives. And imagine you had a really bad day, you don't have anywhere else to live, you had a really shitty day, you've been kicked around, you've been peed on, you're living on a corner of a shop, and people are having a go at you throughout the whole day, and end of the day you're just about to give up, and we've seen the rise on suicidal thoughts among homeless people quite high, and just about to give up, and you're just about to kind of lost faith, lost confidence. You see a group of young people coming up to you with a bit of warm meal, bit of a hot coffee, having a chat with you, just letting you know that they're there. Suddenly, your whole world changes because you suddenly realize, do you know what? If random stranger can come out on this cold, wet, windy weather and give me something, a home cooked meal, then maybe I can fight another day, maybe there's another chance. So having those kind of positive energy, positive messages really made a big difference on the street. And that was the best, I guess, the best part of the whole charity, to able to see that, to able to in Urdu kal mehsus, to able to kind of have that kind of connection really made it worth all the long hours, all the hard work that went in. So, that those are something that I thought, really precious, something that I want to share, of course. And I thought the volunteers also got some of it out of it, and that's why we've seen a consistent rising numbers of volunteers. In fact, some nights we had to say no to people because there's just too many people. So we were blessed. Feed the Homeless Bristol, during the last 5 years, we're really blessed to have that kind of support people, and the achievements that we have done is unbelievable. And again, we had zero money from the government, zero funding. It's all done just by knowing people, just by talking to people, just because we had a really great cause that we were fighting for.
That sounds really, really wonderful. Wow, that's actually quite incredible.
Mm.
Then later afterwards, you set up Projects Against Plastic. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a bit
So
about that?
So obviously, when we did set up Feed the Homeless, it was meant to be a temporary um, a temporary support to a spike. So there was a spike on homelessness, there was a lack of food. So we would go out there, share some of the blessings that we had, and 1, 2, 3 years down the line, we'll go out. We can't find anyone because everybody's got a house, everybody's well off. We are England. We are meant to solve these problems. We're not meant to have people living in poverty on the street. So we will just say, well done, everyone. Thank you. Let's move on and let's do other things. So it was never meant to be a long-term thing. Um, so obviously, my aim was within 3 to 5 years. I wanna move on to something else because it, otherwise, if you create source of food, there always will be people out there who's gonna have, wants to eat. And as much as we love feeding the homeless, we don't obviously want to create a sustainable source of food for people to, become homeless. Or they think, it's okay to become homeless because I know where the foods are. I can just go and eat stuff. So it almost works in a different way. So you've got to be very careful how you balance it. So you're not encouraging people to become homeless because, obviously living cost is going up. Things are difficult doesn't mean, and because you have access to food, that means, you're better if you're homeless. You're well off in that sense because then you don't pay rent and stuff, and people become more resilient. And when they taste that lifestyle, it's difficult to get out. It's one of those holes when you get in. So there's a lot of other things that I had to think about before doing that. So my thing was end of 5 years, I know we need to pack up and let the government do their thing or raise voices or become more change maker rather than just service provider. While I was doing all that network with the restaurants and takeaways, still we had a lot of backups that we needed to do on certain events. I created a really good relationship with the hospitality sector because eventually they were my kind of my behind the scenes supporters. When there was a short or holiday season, we needed 100 meals, 200 meals, I was to call a restaurant and say, we got short on that day, on that weekend, can you help us? And they would cook it straight away. So I visited a number of kitchens and restaurants and places, and every time I visited, I seen plastic everywhere. It's just like I was fortunate to have access to the kitchen, and I see people just putting bags and throwing in the bin, food waste, plastic waste, all in the same bin. And I'm like, you can't really do that because that's not really having a positive impact. And they would say, oh, it's the council's problem. We pay the bin man, it's their problem. We don't really get involved in that. We just put everything in the bin. So I thought, okay, once I see a problem, I can't really just sit on the sideline and say it's okay. So I kind of looked into a little bit more, and then I realized there actually is a serious problem with plastic. And our hospitality sector is one of the biggest contributor. And just by speaking to people, I realized there is a real lack of awareness among the staff, among the managers, among the other places. Even people who orders food doesn't really understand the impact that they're causing with the packaging. So that kind of started to, eye up another bit more complex problem, larger problem. But since I got a good engagement with the business, with the restaurants, with the people, maybe I can carry a little bit more better message, and maybe I can mold it in a way that they could really make an impact. So that's where kind of started to enter into the environmental sector, where the more deeper I dig, the more big problematic it became, and then I had to equip myself as a registered charity. I really wanted to nail down the understanding of what I was going to deliver, so that got me involved more deeper with a number of other organizations, and suddenly I find myself as becoming one of the campaigners on reduction of plastic pollution. And then I looked at the BAME communities, our communities, the Muslim communities. I realized, we all still, we just don't know where we stand in the puzzle of the whole climate crisis. And sometimes we think it's not our problem. So how do we change that? How do we kind of change that behavior? How do we tackle that? And in a way that kind of challenges my skill set, my abilities as well, and I feel like that I could really make a difference. So that's where the Projects Against Plastic started off.
All right. And yeah, plastic is if homelessness is a big problem, plastic is even bigger by orders of magnitude. Because it's everywhere, and the economy kind of revolves around plastic in some way. Like everything is packaged in plastic. It's hard to avoid. And the alternatives, I think people don't really know what many alternatives are, and they're hard to access as well. So, what kind of things have you done then with the hospitality sector? How did you get them to wean off plastic slowly?
So obviously, like you just said, there isn't a lot of alternative options out there. Especially plastic is an amazing material. It does everything you want. It ticks all the boxes for businesses to be able to, to do the packaging, preserve the flavors, avoid cross contamination, the mobility of the products, especially with the Asian cuisine being, hot, liquid, based curries, spices. They need to be, delivered in a way that it doesn't really ruin the cars or delivery couriers. So there's a lot of things that challenges that we faced straight away. Um, and so we started with the very basic. We just wanted to educate people. We realized that what we don't want is to go into the businesses and tell them how to run it, how to do it. Sorry. Um, how to do it. What we wanted to do is we want to empower them, the ability to lead the changes. So what we did, we started to organize in each cities a small event called Curry and Conversation, which is having a curry and having a conversation. So it's nothing complicated, no big jargons, no big stats, nothing complicated, nothing technical. We kept a very basic level of conversation about kind of educating people what plastic is, what kind of things it might impact, how we are using it, and how can we reduce it? What are the options and things like that? And we wanted to have that discussion in a way that it allows them to have that conversation and discuss, and them to actually search and look for the alternatives rather than us kind of promoting any alternatives. So me and there's a charity called City to Sea, which is a big campaigner. So we got together and a couple of the scientists and we designed this Carrying Conversation, which is a workshop to educate that. So we started the first one in 2018 in Bristol, which was massively successful. And then we did 6 other cities across the city where we invite all the curry house owners, the kebab shops, and other food lovers into a room. And then we run a 5 segment of a workshop where we kind of talk about, we start with the pricing, we start with convenience, and we start with behavior changes, and then we discuss, and that gave us an opportunity to actually identify what other challenges, internal challenges as a business they have to actually make any changes. And one thing I learned in the first year is for a businessman, for to invest in alternative packaging, and there are some available options, can be quite expensive. He needs to understand that his market, his customers are changing or wanting that service. So one thing we highlighted is everyone that order food actually doesn't ever complain and doesn't mind, which was the point where a lot of the businessmen were making us, telling us, well, my customers are happy with all this plastic packaging, and you're telling me it's bad for the environment. But my customers, they never complained. They were quite happy. So unless they say that they want a different kind of packaging, unless they demand changes, why as a businessman I would invest another 20,000-30,000 pound and reduce my margin if my customers are happy? So we understood that we can't fight in one way. We got to go to the other direction. It means the customers need to start making a fuss. So we started launch a number of campaigns to educate people. When you order food, always ask for an alternative plastic free option. Even if you know they don't have it, keep asking it, keep putting that on a comment on your Just Eat orders. And we started to see a lot of those movements. Unfortunately, the pandemic has kind of pushed us really back. Some of the work that we were really making progress on, because obviously during the pandemic, all the restaurants went closed. There's a lot of one-way traffic. People are worried about cross-contamination, so they had layer of plastic packaging. With the one-way traffic, which is basically, when we talk about deliveries and Just Eat, where orders are getting from A to B, they naturally have a lot more packaging, and people have gone even lazier. They just want to eat it out from the container. They don't want to wash their plates and cups and cutleries, and they will put everything in the bin in a general waste. So that went up about 70% during pandemic. So we are just now getting back to where we were pre-pandemic and trying to start our educational process again. So the mission of Projects Against Plastic is very simple, very easy. We want to educate and empower ability for the business owners, restaurants, takeaways, as well as the BAME communities to reduce the amount of single-use plastic they have. And that can be as simple in terms of the way they do the process. They can actually take some of the process out, which is unnecessary. So for example, we did a pilot project with Rajasthan Royal Air Takeaway in Downend, where what I noticed when I actually worked there for a couple of nights on the weekends, that every starter you order, so for example, if you order chicken tikka or onion bhajis, you get a free meat tip and a salad as well, and they both come in a single-use plastic. And they used to do that blindly. So any starters get a salad bag, salad and a mint cup. So I said, why don't you give the customer an option and say, do you want any salad? Do you want any mint cup with it? And see what they say, because that way, it's not, you don't have to give every starter, because some people doesn't like salad, some people doesn't like mint yogurt. And they said, okay, we'll trial it. So we spoke to the company that does all that ordering system, and they said, okay, fine. So when they select a starter, they have an option. Would you like a salad? Would you like a mint? You will be absolutely 65% of 2022 orders. The customer says they don't want it. It was unnecessary, just as a default, giving people salad and mint yogurt in a single-use plastic, and they would straight away go to the bin because people are not interested. They're more interested into solid food. So that kind of proved that, there is a real appetite and a real opportunity to reduce some of the unnecessary plastic they are used, and that at the same time business saved a lot of money, because obviously they saved the sauce and the salad as well. So starting to kind of educate people in terms of business, give your customer an option, give them an option where if they use plastic packaging, you charge normal. If you use alternative packaging, which is a little expensive, you charge 50p more, and see what the customer says, how they decide. And then a bit more other work that we're doing that going to help us. And very recently, sorry, this is going to be becoming a long answer for that. We're trying to educate the mosque to become more plastic free as well, because we realize not just the businesses, the community need to be more involved in that. So we're hoping in 2023 we're speaking to at least 20 mosques across the country where we want to do plastic-free Ramadan. So during the month of Ramadan, we want to ban single-use plastic bottle water and install refill stations where people can bring their own bottles and have a drinking water when they break their fast by using a refill mechanism, which will reduce thousands of single-use plastic bottles. So that's something that we're also doing for 2023.
Okay, yeah, this the green iftar is it's a growing theme now. I think it started a few years ago. One thing I was actually thinking about with the iftars is I want to start talking to mosques as well, and it's not so much about a green iftar; it's about the idea of iftar, because in the Prophet's time, iftar was just a normal meal; it wasn't a feast, right? The feast was on Eid, and when you end up feasting, you by consuming more, you create more waste anyway. If we just cut down on how much we consume, that's less meat used, less less demand on the economy, all that kind of stuff. So just having a normal meal for iftar, which is healthier as well. So because we tend to put on weight, which is
of course.
It's against the
and
sunnah.
the amount of food waste that happens in the mosque is unbelievable. I mean, like I said, if you want me to be honest, some of the mosques that are in Bristol that I worked during the month of Ramadan, amount of food that wasted, you could feed another 100 people from that. Because we Asian, background, our eyes are bigger than the belly. When we go in iftar, we like to see a lot of food on the plate, whether we can eat or not, and they're delivered. And people would do that even as a showing off of how much iftar they can provide in each evening to the mosque. It's almost loses the credibility of
Yeah.
the actual meaning of an iftar, and that's just shocking. And plus, obviously, you have the plastic single-use plates, cups, and everything is plastic. Even they use plastic liner at the bottom, and everything goes into a bin. And then most of them are not registered to have bins because obviously they don't have a lot of bin services throughout the year, so they will end up dumping other places. And this is just really shocking. So we really need to set a better example of all those, and then not just example, then we need to communicate those to our local communities, on the household people that come in Friday mosque. We need to relay more conservation and environmental messages. So I'm hoping that level one would be expectation to get rid of the single-use plastic.
Mhm.
Level two would be get rid of the cutleries, address the food waste. Level three will have the recycling knowledge for them to able to share that as part of the Friday sermon to the local people. That it's important that we take responsibility of our actions, and it's important that we do this in conservation of this planet, because it is a gift to us, and we need to we need to have more responsibility for it.
Yeah, I think for those of us from South Asian backgrounds, which is the majority of Muslims in the UK, because we come from backgrounds of absolute poverty, we tend to overcompensate the other way. So
Yep.
we want to like we come from backgrounds of where we're so poor and people don't have enough food. We have too much food. And that's, I think, especially in Ramadan, you get to see that it's about competition of who could provide the most food, and it becomes very exuberant. And I think
Mm.
we do need to tackle that because if you address consumption, plastic will naturally come down as well. And it's
Absolutely,
better for your health,
absolutely.
better for your wallet, is better for the planet. And it's more in line with the sunnah, because if we stop feasting at Ramadan, and that way it's healthier for us, and it's also part of the sunnah, because that's what the Prophet did. The Prophet did not feast on the iftar. That was Eid. Eid is the main feast.
Yeah,
Eid is when you can go all out and enjoy it.
enjoy it.
Yeah.
Alhamdulillah. So yeah, absolutely. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and you can't just do it randomly. So I'm hoping that I'm putting a framework together, and this is something I'm going to launch in January, where we will start to work with the mosque and see if we can really make a difference and reduce it, and make them become the beacon of their communities in terms of sustainability, sort of recycling, and other comms that they should be aware of that, which is also very important. So coming back to the original questions, when we talked about how does Islam impact everything that we do, and this is something that a secret I don't usually share with a lot of people. So in terms of when I looked at Feed the Homeless, the formulating the charity, formulating the process, I actually took everything from my religion in terms of Islam, to actually use those principles to formulate the charity. Even with Projects Against Plastic, whenever I find a complex situation, whenever I encounter something sounds impossible, something sounds very difficult, I actually go back to Islam and see how they have managed it, and pick up all the strategies from there, which is a bit shocking, because a lot of people doesn't understand how much resource, how much problem solving skills, how much direction and guidance are there in Quran and other sunnahs in Islam. And instead of just looking at it religiously, look at it as an engineer, as a technical expertise. I enhance so much technical strategies from those places. Is unbelievable. And the more I use it, the more resources that I can go into. So, if you look at the Quran, it's a book of resource in that manner. If you're really an engineer, you'll find so much resources and energy in that book. It's just, for me, it just becomes an unbelievable book of resource. It became for me. So when I encountered Feed the Homeless, is how do we actually set ourselves a standard of what we're going to provide. Islam straight away gave me the standard, and I just twist the word and I just said, well, because people were asking, so how do we manage our standard of quality of food? And I just said, simple. What we eat is what we give. So if you open up a donation box, and if you are not willing to eat that yourself, you can't give that to people. Simple as that. We had a golden rule, and that rule was driven from that book that I read, and I realized that in Islam, that's what it talks about. It talks about you can only give it to someone something that you are able to eat that yourself. And that straight away gave us the golden rule. So, as soon as we receive donation from these families and other people, the first thing we do is, we check, is that something I'm willing to eat? If I'm not willing to eat that, that's not going to go into the donation. Simple as that. And that always became a golden rule, is what we eat is what we give. So we made sure that, it wasn't like an expired food. It wasn't like a leftover. It wasn't pieces of pizza somebody, ordered because they were greedy and that, they ordered too much. So instead of putting in a bin, they thought, well, there's another bin called homeless. Let's give it to them. So we said, no, we don't want to take any donation like that. Has to be purposely cooked for your family member, and that food has to come as a donation to feed the homeless. So we were really, really, hooked onto that, and that's where we made a big difference in terms of other charities. We weren't going, wedding parties and other house parties to pick up their pieces. We said, no, sorry, it's the wrong charity. What we want is, if you're going to cook something, it has to cook almost like you're cooking for your family, and that is the food that we want you to donate to our charity for the homeless.
This reminds me of the story of Cain and Abel, the sons of Adam, when
yep.
I think it was Abel who made a sacrifice, which was good, and it was good quality sheep, I think, or a cow, and God accepted it. And then Cain, he gave the worst of his flock to God. He sacrificed the worst of his flock, and God was displeased with that. And I think that's the same principle you've got here. Just give the best of what you have. And that's
absolutely, and that puts the sender and receiver on the same level. Somebody that receives the food feels that the quality inequality or that kind of lifting up, and the people that gives out also feels that as well. So both elevates on a different level, and and that's one thing I learned, and I was shocked when I implemented. They're actually working. And then we moved on to like donating clothes and stuff like that. We said similar thing. If you want to donate something, don't bring in a black bean bag and just dump it in our charity, because we don't do that. What we want is, yes, if it's used, it's fine. Wash it, clean it, pack it nicely. So when you give someone a gift, it elevates the both send and receive on the same level. So we are almost trying to change the narrative of how to give homelessness, how to give charity on that level, without having Arabic written all over the place or without making it Islamic. But everything was driving from my faith and belief in Islam. And that's a very similar thing with Projects Against Plastic. Everything that we talk about, every strategy that I use is all driven from that book, from the reading that book. And I just keep telling people, if you're having a problem, if you want to do something, if you want to go somewhere, if you want to conquer the world, this is called Book of Knowledge for a reason. Don't treat that just as and just leave it on there and you just bring it out to read it. I think we don't utilize what we have, and we just make it as a money fund for religion. I think this book holds a lot more than what it's showcased as a Muslim.
No, definitely, because in Ramadan we do khatams and read in Arabic, and you don't understand anything. What's the point?
Yeah, I mean, I just recently read a hadith that memorizing the whole Quran, which is amazing gift, and actually reading a verse on the Quran with the meaning is more powerful. Which is, it's just, I know I'm just missing out so many things like that, and I'm trying to capture those and try to utilize those now. It's almost like, I was reborn as a Muslim and really understanding the piece of puzzles that, always been in front of me, but always in a different context. And I think this is something that we need to really ask those questions and really learn and rediscover Islam in a different way. And that's what I'm doing. I'm just, learning complete different way where I was taught, at the younger
same for
age.
me growing up. because initially just reading Arabic all the time. But if you think about it, what does God want you to do? Read in Arabic or read in a language you understand? Otherwise, what's the point sending a book down if you're not going to ever understand it?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. I
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of work, and that's one of the reasons I like. And I have to say, I'm influenced by Ustad Numan Ali Khan because he really reads Quran in a complete different language and different way. I mean, it's not a book of fact where or like a numbers or or definite. It's a book of journey, stories, and guidance. So there's a huge difference between those two. And if you really want to understand it and relate to it, then you got to go through and understand that journey. And I think Numan Ali Khan really explains that on the next level. That I really when it can make me more interested about the book of Quran, about what the Islamic religion, because there's so much there to kind of harvest and kind of um, add value to what we're already doing in our personal, in our work life, in our charity life. It's unbelievable, and it's often not recognized because we just always took that as a book they're meant to be just sacred and hidden and just used, certain rituals, and that's it. I think that barrier needs to be broken down. There has to be book of everything. So any problem you find, you need to start with that. That's where the strategy needs to be. Um, that's how I feel. That's how I feel like, and that's how I think it's impacting me and everything else I'm doing, because he's directly kind of guiding me and giving me principles to work on it, giving me foundations. Because it's often difficult if you're being an entrepreneur, being, kind of experimenting in a dimension or a space where your family or you're not familiar with, but you do want to explore it. So my next charity, and then this is I want to talk about it, is going to be something different. So I'm working with Voice Plastic. It's a long term thing, but I got a retirement project where I want to work with, you know, astronomy. I want to really, really want to learn about the sky. I want to really learn about the stars. I really want to understand the relationship in the universe. And the reason I was interested because in the Quran, many times and many verses, it actually tells you, look up the sky, look up, just look up, you know, and with the one verses, it says, look up, but then it says, look up again, because you're not seeing the things that I've laid out to you.
Yeah.
And and we are not exploring that. If you look at the history, we were the Muslim were the pioneers, to understand the space and the universe. And yet now we're way behind. We just don't even acknowledge that part. Um, so this is something that I'm quite interested to kind of jump in, because it's just the more you learn, the power of creator is displayed there so much that you're nothing into what is out there. And I think it gives my faith more power. It builds a better relationship with me and my creator, I think. And I feel like there's so much to learning that can be done. So yeah, so going back to the question, I think you got to have faith, you got to have a relationship with your religion, and you got to really harness the energy, the knowledge and the goodness it brings. Otherwise, I don't think you can move forward. Well, I couldn't. I mean, I was probably earning quite a lot of money in my late 20s, done a good degree. I was going to Dubai. I was working in Canada. I was working with really, really large company. But I was never satisfied. I was never happy. I could never have a good night's sleep because I'm always chasing. I'm chasing
Mhm.
something. And now I don't have that. I earn a very small amount of money. And it took me 5 years to convince my wife and family that this is a lifestyle I want. I don't want a big, expensive house. I want a very small space, but I want to spend more time with my family. And finally, I actually managed to break that through. And now I earn a very small amount of money. My expense is very small, and I dedicate my time to things that I really enjoy. So almost like a free man, which is very rare, and but it can happen. And Islam has taught me that. So when I went back and said, like you started off with the question, how do you struggle? Having a full-time job, having so much commitment, I said, just reduce. Don't go into, competitions with what your friend owns, what other people are doing in terms of how much money they have. Don't get into conversations with friends. I have 10 billion there. I have 2 billion there. I'm going on expensive holidays. I'm doing that. I just said, it's all out of my league. I'm feeding few people this weekend. That's all I'm doing. I'm planting some tree this weekend. If I have if I have more free time, I'll go and volunteer with youth clubs because there's so much I learn. That's how I spend my weekend. As long as you start to accept it, your family needs to accept it, which is the difficult part. My mom still thinks I'm the failure son that she has, compared to others that have 2 houses, 3 houses, expensive cars. But I feel like I can achieve more, and I'm doing a lot more than that. And I
Yeah, it's
think
about
making
quality
that
of life, isn't
boundary,
it? You
yeah,
feel like
yeah,
you've got that quality of life.
absolutely.
Yeah.
My 1 pound is a lot more stronger and takes me further than some people can earn,
Yeah, because no one
thousands.
on the deathbed says, I wish I spent more time in the office. They say, I wish I had a better quality of life.
Life,
Yeah.
and we should learn that. We've seen that over and over and over again, people earning so much money that they never had the time to spend it with anything. So why should we repeat the same thing? If we
Mhm.
don't break that barrier, if we don't break that tradition, the who will? So I've gone to kind of like a very, very simple life where I don't have any assets, any properties, any success in that measure to talk about. What I do is talk about experiences and the people that I met. I met some of the most amazing people that I would never meet during my life, working career or any other career unless I was involved in the voluntary sector, charity sector. Some amazing people out there. And the more people you meet, it just inspires you more. So it's an opportunity, and that also gives you the opportunity to spread, your message, your Islam, your peaceness. That's what, the cracks down to that very principle. What is it that you are actually doing? What is the mission as an individual we are doing if we are not spreading the goodness, of our Lord? And in a disguise, this is what I think I'm almost, I'm doing in that sense. People often ask me, like, why are you here? Why do you drive this? It's a way of opening that conversation, and they get mesmerized.
Mhm.
People think, wow, does your religion really talk to you like that? I'm like, of course. This is why I'm here. This is what I do. This is what drives me forward. So I think it's a really great way of kind of spreading a lot of good messages about religion, about our faith, and encouraging people to become, because obviously, our job is to relay the message. And I always do every opportunity I have. So in 2019, I was invited by Her Majesty the Queen to have lunch with her. She was in Somerset, opening up a musical hall in Kings Burton. So she wanted to have lunch with, five, about 10 people within her area where change makers or game changers they call it. So I got pulled in from the Lord Lieutenant and said, "Would you like to have a lunch? Her Majesty is inviting 10 people, and I think you should be one of them." I said, "Okay, sure. I've never done that before." I thought I'm going to have a sniper on my head just in case, I suddenly start to say Allahu Akbar loudly. Um, but yeah, when I met her, the first thing I did is, and this is something taught by someone else, I gave her the message. I said, I'm a Muslim, and my first thing is I want to give you a message that there's, there's no Lord except one. And to be able to relay that, to be able to say that, the ability is all comes from everything else that I've been doing. So this is part of my ritual. Like every person that I met, on that level, the first thing I do is I introduce myself as a Muslim, and as a part of a Muslim, it's up to you to accept it or not. But this is the message that I bring. So in the day of judgment, nobody says that, oh, you never told me about it, have you? So I think these are very important key points that you pick up as you go along and become a campaigner, become dealing with a lot of issues around environment and other people. And I think it's important that we cherish those and spread the message across. Um, you there's so many Muslim people are doing so many amazing work, and it's good that Hamza you're trying to capture their stories because their stories will hopefully inspire others to move forward and really get involved beyond becoming a doctor, an engineer, and all the titles that we can think of.
That
Has
is,
to be more than that.
I mean, yeah, I think we are coming up to time now. It's been
Yeah.
wonderful talking. You talked about, your Feed the Homeless, Project Since Plastic, and also the motivations and how faith really underpins what you do. And I think there's a wonderful message there for many people. So Naseem, thank you for coming on. It's been a real pleasure listening to you. You have a wonderful
Thank
story.
you, mashallah. Thank you so much for giving the opportunity to share all that, because not often you get a chance to really share all that. But I think it's a great opportunity. Keep up this work, and I think it's going to benefit hopefully others. And if there's any opportunity for me to support anything, do let me know. Anything good, alhamdulillah, I'll try my best to support that. Not a problem.